Attack of the 50-Foot Colossi. This is a war game by Herman Luttmann, a very, very eclectic designer. He can design intensely historical games such as Metz 1870, which I reviewed recently, or folio games which are about sci-fi conflicts and that have very distinct B-movie feel to them, and this is just one of them. Not only that, but these are games that, although they come in folio format, everything is in paper or cardboard, you need to add dice, they have a certain Ameritrash feel to them. And I'm not saying Ameritrash to be unpatriotic, I'm talking about Ameritrash in the technical way that we use the term when talking about games, which is games that have a combat theme, combat dynamics, a lot of randomness, and are highly thematic games that do not fear to add 10 extra rules to create 8 extra effects. Traditional Ameritrash games also come with all the plastic and flashy components. Components aside, this feels like Ameritrash. Ameritrash on the cheap, or at least much more affordable. Also easier to carry around. Some of those Ameritrash games you can carry with you when you're traveling. Attack of the 50-Foot Colossi also is a solitaire game. You, the player, will be controlling the humans, and you will be fighting on the planets of these gigantic rock monsters. And you will try to destroy them, to do as much damage to them as possible, which is very hard. And also you will try to complete different missions. You have 3 scenarios and they work in different ways. The game comes with a paper map, which is double-sided, so we have different types of landscape. The game comes with counters, not with the tray that you see here. I added the GMT counter tray, but it's good to show you the components. We have the Marines, the humans. They include the Marines, the Scouts, headquarters, miners, heavy weapons, etc., etc. So the humans that you control will have an indication of their type, and based on that there may be special actions that they can perform. For example, the headquarter can call an orbital strike, the medic can help you recover, that kind of stuff. And then they have these 3 values here. This is combat value, which is the number of dice that the unit rolls in combat. This is the defense. If the opponent exceeds that number with an attack roll, that's bad for your Marine. And this is the movement value. And so during the game you will add your people to the board based on the schedule of reinforcements described in the scenario instructions, the instructions for the scenario that you have elected to play. And this is also, another interesting thing is that here the humans are coming from space. So you are planning, you're trying to land in certain locations, but you may not be able to. You need to roll dice and see if you're able to land in a location where you wanted to land, or in an adjacent location, or somewhere else entirely randomly determined. There is a lot of randomness in almost every element of the design. This is something you should be familiar with if you played other sci-fi games by Luttmann, and also some of his historical games have that element too. So this is for the humans. And the Colossi. The Colossi are big and scary, and they come in different colors. They're called tribes. And basically, to form a tribe, you draw a certain random numbers of tokens of a certain tribe. For example, if you have a red Colossi, you draw 5 of these tokens and you put them in a stack in a random order, one on top of each other. You can think of them as walking in a single line and only one of them can be attacked at a time, or as a gigantic monster that when he gets hit gets reduced, and when he gets hit again, parts of the rock body falls off and another layer is visible. Basically, to destroy a tribe you have to go through the entire stack. And the red ones are particularly tough. They have 5 counters. Others are less dangerous. Well, they're smaller. Let's put it that way. They're all dangerous. For example, you have the yellow ones that have 4 counters. You have the black ones that have 3 and just put some, I'll put some on the board to give you a sense. So when you're attacking the Colossi, you can only attack the counter that is on top of the stack, and only attack, of course, the stats that are visible on the counter. The turn track has a lot of phases. Don't be demoralized. There are a lot of things going on. A little bit of preparation, random events, your phase, and then the Colossi will do a lot of bad stuff to you, which is part of the fun, of course. Draw event chits, like in other games by Lotman. You will have random events, you resolve those, you do what the event chit says. A lot of randomness, which is fun, especially, you know, you're playing a solitaire game, so you're not like, well, the randomness gave my opponent victory. I'm playing against the system, and I want things to be unpredictable. I want things to be challenging. Then it is time for the Marines to act. You have Marine recovery if your Marine has disrupted or has been stunned, for example, or has been stunned or paralyzed, then you may roll a die attempting to remove that condition. Next, the Marines will receive their reinforcements. Again, you roll to see if you're able to get them where you want to get them. And then there's the main phase where all of your units get to move up to their full movement allowance, and some special movements like the jump packs, or they can attack without penalty, or they can do a little bit of both. Move at a reduced rate and attack with a penalty. As for attacking, they're using these ginormous, super powerful weapons, so range is not a consideration. Line of sight still is, so you can attack with your units that have the capability to attack and that have a line of sight to their target. You roll a number of dice equal to your firepower, with a penalty if you moved also, and then you are scoring a hit for each number that you roll, which is higher than the armor that is visible at the time on top of the Colossus stack. So each number that I'm rolling here, which is 4 or more, is a hit. However, these guys are really thick skin, because I need to score 3 hits to actually reduce the stack by one step, which is to reduce a full counter or remove a reduced counter and reveal the next counter. So that is, well, here if I'm scoring and trying to get 3 numbers more than 3 is not so much, but when it gets to like basically I need 3 5s or 6s, it gets a little tougher. If you score a number of hits with an attack which is not 3, is less than 3, so you score 1 hit or 2 hits, you don't really do permanent damage, but you at least chipped away part of the enemy. So you place this marker on it or next to it as a reminder, and that means that now that lowers their defense number. Now, if I'm trying to go above 4, about 2 or over 3, it's a little more reasonable. Important thing, these guys regenerate very fast, which means that that chipped marker will stay there only for the current phase, at the end of which it will be removed. So the idea of concentrating fire, a guy will chip away at an enemy and the other people will exploit that and will try to really inflict temporary damage. That's very important. You need to coordinate action, which is fun. It's just an interesting element. It means that you had to think of your resources as more than the sum of the parts, not just everybody does their own thing. Now, after you have taken your actions, and again, different Marines have different actions, you have different weapons, there is almost a rule for every single weapon, which again doesn't get to the point the game feels fiddly. It is richly thematic, let's put it that way, but you will have to flip through the player rates and the rulebook a couple of times early on when you're just a reminder of what each unit can do, each weapon can do, and how different actors behave. Then it gets to the bad guys. Now, there is an important thing that I have to say. The Colossi poop gravels. Yes, they don't use that word, but that their saber game effect. They say, reduce the Colossi, the Colossus, and place a gravel. To me, that is the image of the guy taking a little poop. on the planet. It's his planet, so he can do it. Yeah, by the way, you are the invaders, so there is that colonial aspect to take into account, and you had to deal with morally. So there's gonna be gravel on the board, some there at the beginning as personnel instructions, some is gonna be there because the Colossi produce it. You can attack the gravel as normal. You fire onto the gravel, and why would you do so? Because that gravel is like radioactive, is ready to morph into bad stuff. After the Marines have taken their action, there is a phase called the Aura of Our Ancestors, one of the most beautiful names for a game phase that I ever heard. This is not as good for you as the name when you're actually implementing it, because you choose one of the gravel markers on the board, you flip it to the other side, and you resolve the random effect. Yes, randomness that is there. These bunches of gravel, this heap of gravel may explode, may do a lot of bad stuff to you. After you resolve the gravel, it's time for our big Colossi to actually activate. You draw a card from this deck to indicate the order in which they activate and which ones will activate. So here I start with the tombstone and yellow stones and gray stones. For example, here on the map I have the yellow stones. Do I? Yes, I do. And this is a minor complaint that I have against the components. They clearly wanted to mark the full side and differentiate it from the reduced side. I want to mark that using color, but when this is on top of a stack, to me that is not automatic that is a yellow stack. They could have done, yellow, the background color being the same in here, like a little band, a little color symbol here in the corner, like it is done in some other war games. So yes, that is a yellow one. So now I activate the yellow stones, and then the red stones, and then the green stones, and on so forth. When you activate the Colossi, they will try to move close as possible to the closest enemy unit. If they move adjacent to one of your units, they slam it really, really hard. Also, after that, after they did their big slapping, they have special attacks. And again, keep the player aid next to you, because there's a bunch of effects, and so you'll take a while to become familiar with them. And you implement the special effects. I'm not going into detail of how you resolve each of these, but just to give you a sense of different tribes of Colossi do very different things. After you resolve that, the final effect then is the end of the phase. You move to the next turn. So it sounds scary when I talk about all these phases in such separate terms, but basically you resolve a random event at the beginning, you implement your own phase, which is standard stuff: recover, reinforcement, move and shoot. Random event for the monsters coming from the gravel. The monsters activate, trying to move next to you to hit you, and they use their special attacks. Continue like this until the end of the last turn, and then at that point you look at the victory conditions. Well, you should have looked at them a little earlier, but you check the victory conditions to see how many points you scored and how well or poorly you did in the game. Now, Attack of the 50-Foot Colossi has a lot of good things, has some of the things that you may know from previous pulp sci-fi games by the same design. However, they're not necessarily all crowd pleasers. There are things that I like, but I don't know that everybody will. One thing that I like with this theme, with this type of design, is randomness. I like the fact that there is a lot of it, because that means replay value. There's just so much random stuff that may happen that you're not likely to see all that the game has to offer the first time that you play the game, or the second or the third. There will be new events that you didn't see before, new combinations of events that will become totally they will come out in totally crazy sequences, and sometimes you will just be bashed by the game because of randomness, and that's perfectly fine to me, because it's a solitaire game. I don't feel bad that I lost against you or I made some terrible moves. It's like, if I lose the game, I don't have many regrets. From time to time I do, but sometimes it's just the randomness of the system. I think that is part of the fun of playing a solitaire game, and I think it works particularly well with this kind of theme. Yes, now if I was playing an historical game, a tight historical game, and trying to understand history and to see the dynamics, the game has too much randomness, then I start feeling that, well, I've just, the historical value, the analytical value of the design to me would be reduced. I'm not worried here that randomness is going to make things go in non-historical ways because the topic is not historical to start with. The topic is also one that lends itself to be taken humorously with this B-movie feel to it. And so the fact that weird stuff happens in unpredictable ways almost feels like fun and entertaining bad screenwriting, almost like you're watching a B movie from the 50s or the 60s and they keep jumping the shark. Look like, oh, there was a lull in the action, then a monster that was on the other side of the board digs a tunnel, comes out next to you and bashes your heroes in the face. It was, oh, that's like bad plot passage, and it's perfectly fine if it's in a movie that you're enjoying because of its weirdness, its zany quality, because of its unpredictability, and it's perfectly fine to me in a game that captures that general idea and flavor. So I love it. I think it's really fun. There were moments in which table stuff happened to my miners or to my soldiers. I was like, this is great because I'm really enjoying the madness of the system. This, however, is not something that's going to necessarily be a crowd pleaser. If you just play for winning, then it's a game that maybe will be disappointing to you at some point. I think really this is a game that should be played and enjoyed for the theme. Another element, again, that works with the theme, is that you have a lot of detail. You have a lot of detail. Almost every unit has something that is specific. Like every human can do something different and has some limitations here and there. And there's a mini procedure and a mini table to resolve what is that unique thing that the unit does. There are even units that there is a unit that transforms itself, starts as like a civilian, can turn into a military person. So there are two procedures to handle that unit. Each Colossus, each type of Colossus behaves differently. So you have a lot of that detail, which means that you're going to flip through player rates and the rulebook quite a bit at the beginning. I would say even after a while, not just your first game. And again, that is gonna feel probably fiddly to some players if you enjoy the extra thematic depth. I don't know that depth is the right word. The extra thematic richness that you get out of it, then of course this could be enjoyable too. And again, I like that. Although I had to check the tables, I like the fact that the red Colossi did one thing, that the black Colossi, the white Colossi, the yellow Colossi, they all did another thing. For a folio game, the production values are definitely good. The map looks good, the rulebook looks good, the counters they have nice art that I really think is important, again, because you want to feel the theme, and these horrendous rocky colossi really come across. Even the fact that they are placed in stacks gives you the sense of the size, of the scope of these gigantic monsters. I think that is a nice touch, as opposed to having various counters representing a tribe of monsters to stack them one on top of the other. Short of using three-dimensional miniatures, which of course would have required then a box to store them and an entirely different investment in production, short of that, to me, this is a smart way of giving you a three-dimensional feel without using actual miniatures. My only complaint about the components is in the fact that the fresh side and the exhausted side of some of the tribes really look different, and on the exhausted side, sometimes the counters don't look like the way I expect a counter of that color to look like. Again, the yellow that looks kind of like brownish, dark olive color. That is a very minor thing. After a while, you'll also start making a connection. Okay, that is what they mean when they mention that color. It's a really small thing. In general, this is a solid game for the player that is willing to get down this road. Again, it's a very specific type of game. It has a very specific audience. It's a specialized game in that sense, almost like games about the Franco-Prussian War, about the Italian Risorgimento. It has its own niche, and not everybody will enjoy them, because you have to be in the right mood to play a game with this topic, and a game that commits to that topic, that really gives you a set of mechanics that feel unpolished, but they're not. They feel fiddly, but they're not necessarily. They give you a lot of weirdness, and it fits the theme. So for enthusiasts of B-movies or games that are fun, and they can be and can reward good gameplay to an extent, but also for games that don't take themselves too seriously, then I think the Attack of the 50-Foot Colossi, it's definitely a good option. It's for the committed wargamer that doesn't fear to take a break from the harder, the heavier, the meatier stuff. It is, in general, for somebody who enjoys sci-fi, also enjoys getting a laugh, not just at the components of the atmosphere, but also the crazy stuff that may happen to them. It's a game that I think needs to be played with some irony, but if you enter in the right mood, in the right spirit, then Attack of the 50-Foot Colossi can be a lot of fun.